And I also want to acknowledge we had some difficulties in connecting on our streaming for the work session. That is all recorded. That's correct, Dr. Ricky Smith, correct?
That is correct.
Anyone who was unable to watch us that wanted to do that is certainly welcome to watch the recording that will be posted for your viewing. So we apologize for that. I thank our technical team. I think we're squared away, so we'll be good to go going forward. And with that, as I mentioned, we did meet at 5 for a work session to talk about our policy JHH student suicide prevention review, which is also a discussion around our plan that would be in support of the policy. And at this time, we will move to the art of community. Board members and Rowan and Emily. It's been a lot the last few weeks. And so let's just do a quick round with Dr. Ricky Smith joining us. I would have everyone do it, but we'll be sadly, an hour or 45 minutes into it. But how about board members and our student representatives and Dr. Ricky Smith? Let's pick one that we're going to focus on this evening as we do our work. And I will start, and I will say we strive to be in community with one another with care, and welcome everybody.
I'm going to focus on we acknowledge that we bring our lived experiences into our conversations.
We will listen with intention to learn something new.
We remember that conversation is a natural way we come together.
I guess I'm going next. We bring our lived experiences into our conversations.
And I would offer we slow down so we have time to think and reflect.
We will listen with intention to learn something new.
We try to stay curious about each other.
And how about I add, and I promise to know when I'm on mute. Cabinet members, I'm sure you are all individually reflecting on those aspects of our community as well. So with that, Dr. Ricky Smith, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none, Chair.
Okay, this evening's consent agenda includes the May 20th Budget Committee minutes, Human Resources, Personnel, and Action Report, our preliminary August financial report, second reading of board policy, and that was included. I don't have the number right in front of me or lettering, and then the review of board committee assignments. Board members, anything you would like removed from the consent? Okay, with that, I will take an action to accept the agenda as presented.
I move to accept the agenda as presented.
A second.
Motion was made and seconded to accept the agenda as presented. And as always, I will do roll call. If you approve, please signify by saying aye. Director Bowman.
Aye.
Director Emerson.
Aye.
Director Fox.
Aye.
Director Zertsmead.
Aye.
And Director Wolf is an aye. Motion carries, and we are off to the races. Recognition and good news. Director, do we start with Director N or Director Rose?
Actually, I will say that this evening will be the first presentation of a series that we plan to bring to the board that will introduce you to the work that our affinity groups are doing. And tonight I'm going to turn it over to Director N so she can talk to you about our Black Student Union. And Director N?
Hi, thank you. I'm wondering if we have the slide deck open. I can share it actually. I have it if we don't. Hello everyone, it's my pleasure to introduce Octavia, and I think Amara is on here. I do not see Abdi.
Abdi is going to be like 2 minutes late. He's at work, so
Oh, okay. Oh,
he'll be
yeah. Well, that is important.
yeah.
Well, actually, I would like to project first of all, and then I would like to introduce you to Octavia Horn. I'm really excited to share this the series that we're going to be sharing for Good News, and I'd like to again introduce you to Octavia Horn, and she'll take it away. And Octavia, just tell me when to move to the next slide.
Okay. Thank you everyone for having us here tonight, board, and our superintendent and vice superintendent. Thank you so much. And next slide. My name is Octavia Horn, and I'm the culture responsive liaison for the TTSD and our district BSU coordinator. I also want to honor tonight my mother, Flora Horn, who also helped me with this work. This is her last year at TTSD, and I know for a fact that I would not be here without her. So I wanted to honor her tonight. And I wanted to introduce you to our BSU president. So next slide, please. So Abdurrahim Muhammad is our BSU president for Tigard High School. He's with his work uniform on right there. He's at work. So BSU at Tigard just started this year in January. So he has spearheaded that as well. And I'm going to have Amira introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amira Horn-Vaden, and I'm the BSU president at Tigard-Tualatin High School.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So in this series, we have 3 components that we work with, right? Our emotional support system, and that kind of consists of the BSU group itself. Why are we here? We're here for support, to be able to talk to one another with like minds like ourselves. And we want to be able to have that space for them to be able to know that somebody is there for them. We also have the knowledge, the knowledge portion, which kind of consists of our cultural history knowledge, along with processes, along with policies. So a lot of knowledge in that component there, to loop in our advocacy portion, which I know you've seen a lot of that this year. Just our students being involved and being able to be a part of that change, and see what those outcomes are. Next slide, please. And so along with that knowledge, this is some of the things that BSU had been up to this year. Every year, Tualatin holds Traveling Black History Museum, which this year, the background was the history of hip hop and how it correlates with different things that happen politically or civil rights. So in this particular, in January, we were able to host that at Tualatin, and we were able to have all 3 levels represented for the first time in BSU history. So Templeton Elementary, BSU, Tualatin, Fowler, Hazelbrook was there, and then Tualatin High School was there. So as you can see, it was the first time at that time that all 3 levels were represented. And then we had other knowledge times where BSU went to Black in Space, which we were invited by Comcast, African American Urban group that they have. In that particular time, they had a question and answer portion by the director who directed Black in Space. And they were able to learn so many things about what was going on at that time surrounding that. And not to mention, they had like a 5-course meal, which I think our students were just like, what is this? You know, they were able to experience that experience as well. So they really enjoyed that. A number of other things that we've done, gone to U of O, and we had so many other things in the process before COVID hit with PSU. So that knowledge component was extremely important. Next slide, please. And then community and connection. We were able this year to do our BSU TTSD community event where our middle schools really band together. Matt Kingsley, Mary Patrice, and Jelaine Christie really helped out with that. I have to give a shout out to my dad, who was an amazing cook. And every time we need him, we call him and he comes through. So a lot of that food you see is from him. Thank you, Dad, Elmore Horn. And then we were able to get a lot of resources from Ezel's Chicken as well. They helped out a lot. So that community event took place. Just a time that our students were able to give back to our community and let them know what we've been doing with BSU. And then also this year, we were able, for our February event for Black History Month, put together our first BSU Spirit Week, where our students, in this particular picture, we were able to host all 3 BSUs and both high schools at the first time ever at our Tualatin, at Tualatin High School, at a time during school, which coordinating wise was an experience, but definitely beneficial. The students were so excited, so happy. And not only our BSU students, but the other students were excited as well. They were like, what is happening? What is this? You know, first for everybody. And I think everyone enjoyed themselves. And then our BSU annual family picnic that we do, our barbecue, we do at Cook Park, just more time for community and connection. Next slide, please. So our social emotional supports, this year we were, for the past 2 years, we've been able to pilot our Lunchmate program, a program that we use that came about with working in partnership with Jordan Mills and her equity department there. Just being able to have faces like ours in these hallways. A lot of feedback from our family connection series is that we need to see more people like us. And my first response to that was like, well, how can we make that happen right now? Because, you know, our district was in that process, but we weren't there yet. So this was the way that I felt that we could do that right away. And we band together as a group, our BSU group, and we were like, we're gonna go and we're gonna see what this is like. So what this day would consist of is like our BSU students would eat lunch before they go, so our high school students. And then they would either go to Bridgeport Elementary or Byram with Matt Coleman. And the first initial meeting would be all 5 lunches from K through 5. And just have that conversation with the students, be able to sit with them and just get to know them. A second round would be like, okay, let's go into some classrooms. Those meetings would consist of either a panel. So you see they're in a panel kind, and the students have pre-written questions that they've already went over with their teachers, and they ask the high school students questions about, you know, what it's like to be a high school student, or what it's like to be, what do you like to do? Just getting to know. Other things that we've done were for Black History Month, we had Black History posters and we brought them in and we helped create them. And the second graders, I mean, they were so excited. We took some of their posters, we took them back to the high school and posted them up at high school, and they were like over the moon about it. It really doesn't take much, but they were so happy. So just that connection with the students. And then of course they went to lunch and recess, which I think the high school students enjoyed that way more than the other students, because when they went outside, it was like all that, you know, that built up pressure of high school just went right out the door. And they were able to have that time with them. So our Lunchmate program is almost like a mirror, right? It's benefiting our students, it's benefiting our teachers, and it's also benefiting our high school students as well. So definitely a great program that I can hope continues. Next slide, please. And so the advocacy part, a portion of this is one that I feel our BSU presidents really took by storm. The work that they put in this past year, from visuals to marches to the policies that we put together, they really outshine, and I'm extremely proud of them for the work that they put in. And I just want Amira to kind of speak on how she feels that this process has led her thus far. Amira?
Yes. Being the voice for my people and the people that like my BSU people and all that. It was really hard at first, but I'm getting better at it, and having Abdi there to help me, because he's really good at being a good advocate for everyone. It really helped me, and it's helped me as a person to grow as a better person as well. So it's been really good, a really good experience, and something that I will never forget.
Abdurrahim?
Hello to everybody. Sorry about being late. I'm in the middle of Taco Bell right now, just at work on my lunch break. It's been a long time. Good to see everybody. Good to see Maureen Wolf. BSU, all I can say, it's been amazing, man. The advocacy you've been doing, it's just like one of the best things. I think the best moments so far has been like one of the BSU people swiping up on my story and saying thank you, or saying thank you for doing all this big stuff, or you're going to do big things. When things like that are said, I feel like it gives them hope, and it sparks hope in them that they didn't have previously. And that's all you can really ask for, when you can shine, a spotlight on somebody. You can say, oh my God, I've done all this and that, but I'm telling you guys right now, I would not be able to do anything I've done without the support of my Tiger High School BSU. We're just like a little squad. We roll together, and yeah, I think that's all I can say. Yeah.
Thank you. Next slide. So this here is just like we were saying, there was a lot of feedback from our family affinity connection group about how we can be more, have more mentorship towards our students and what that looks like. So right now our high school students are mentoring with our Lunchmate program, and our middle school students also as well. Our Tualatin goes to Templeton. Those are our mentorship for our elementary schools, but we want it more for our upper classmen. So student voice community, from our community organizations would help mentor our high school and middle school. And also another component that I feel would be beneficial is using our cabinet leaders for mentorship. We have our affinity groups consist of president, vice president, communications. I see you over there, Tracy. We have secretaries. So just having that connection with our cabinet leadership and being able to provide mentorship through them is another component to connection with our community and our students, and adding that also that transparency, right? And then the invitation to the board is just to have you guys come and participate in our Lunchmate program, and also adding that community connection and that transparency with our students, so they can build that relationship. I feel like would be beneficial for all of our students. So in a nutshell, that's BSU tonight, and I thank you guys for listening, and thank you.
All right, thank you, Octavia and Abdi and Amira.
So Octavia, I have a question for you. So first of all, congratulations, Amira and Abdi, what outstanding student leaders and all that you've accomplished. And thank you, Octavia, for I'm sure your mentorship and your guidance, and just always the backup there. I'm sure just even as you did a shout out to your husband for the food, all that is really important, items for success. But my question is, this board has always been eager to jump in when the invitations are extended. So how do you see in our distance world and our Zoom world some of these programs looking as we will likely be in this mode for a while? How do we get involved? How do we help with that?
Definitely, I feel like probably the same way I've been getting involved. I've been dropping in on a couple of BSU meetings here and there. Our middle school has started their hour meetings. I know we have some high school meetings starting up next month. I think that's a good way to just do an intro in definitely being in this distant learning age. So I know that I know our students are eager to just get to face, but I feel like that could be the first step into gradually getting to where we need to be.
That's great. Thank you for that. And so we'll work either with Tracy or with Dr. Unn to get those invitations connected. Board members, do you all have questions, comments?
I think sort of a broad question that I'll ask to anyone who wants to respond, and maybe Zinnia, you can jump in here, but because this is our first highlighting of affinity groups, and there might be community members who aren't familiar with affinity groups, or maybe they didn't have affinity groups when they were in high school. You know, and I think you made the case throughout your presentation, but if folks were wondering, what's the value of an affinity group? Why do they matter? Or might have some questions about like where they come from. How would you respond to someone who maybe doesn't identify with an underrepresented group in our district and, you know, is curious about that?
Yeah, I can share about that. And it was on the cover sheet as well. You know, you actually look in corporate world, there's a whole bunch of research around, you know, affinity spaces as a way to engage, connect, you know, employees on, you know, feeling a part of a community. But the other part of it too, what we know around what we actually reviewed during the hate speech listening sessions is that when you have a space where people feel connected, not only does it speak to having an affinity space, but it speaks to the broader community in their acceptance, understanding, and connection with the need for that. So that it all adds to the process of feeling seen, heard, and connected. And like we said earlier, it's really a space, especially in education, knowing our demographics of, you know, nationally we have, you know, 82% of our teachers are white, and our demographics are, we're heading to 52% of our demographics being students of color or culturally and linguistically diverse. In Oregon, it's 90%, and students is 40%. So it offers, you know, an understanding that as a broader community, we see students for who they are and give the support that they need. So that's, I think, a longer way of saying it, but you can also see review. It's really creating a safe space for community.
That's great. Thank you. And I don't know, Abdi or Amara, if either of you want to jump in and just say, you know, what does it mean to you as a student from an underrepresented group where there aren't a lot of students who look like you? What does it mean to you to be able to have this space? Why is that a good thing for you?
Amara, do you want to go first, or should I just go? Okay, I'll just
You
go.
can
Actually.
go. Yeah.
Okay. It's all good. I think it's nice because you go through all your classes and you probably don't see people who look like you, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. You're talking about some subject that affects, you know, Black people, and you look around and nobody looks like you. The whole class is looking at you, and then you have this space, you know, where you go to lunch and you see people who look like you all around you. You can have conversations that you previously couldn't have had, and it makes you feel comfortable, you know. It makes you just feel like I can finally just be myself in this position, because that's one thing that I've noticed about the students of color in our schools. Oftentimes I have to put on a front to fit in, and I feel like when you're around people who look like you know, who have the same slang as you, you know, who you can talk about things that can relate to you, it helps build that connection. It helps build a better culture in between you guys. So yeah, that's all I can say about it.
Yeah, I have to definitely agree with some of the things that Abdi is saying. It's just like a comfortable place to go to. Like, you have your friends that understand what you're going through on a day-to-day, being some of the only colored people to walk the halls. And like, it's a big struggle. It's pretty hard to do. But they understand it and they get it. And like, most of your friends there that aren't in BSU, that aren't, you know, colored, they'll just be like, oh, you know, like, I don't really get it. And you're just uncomfortable and you feel kind of out of place. But in BSU, it's the complete opposite. Like, you can just get along with everyone and just say how you feel about everything.
Beautifully said by both of you. I really appreciate your vulnerability and honesty in sharing that. And I think it's helpful for other folks to hear those perspectives too. So I appreciate all of you being here tonight.
Yeah, I echo that. Thank you so much for your honesty and your words. That was it's very eloquent. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you as well. And also, I did not know that Flo was retiring. This is her last year and she's going to be sorely missed. I'm happy for her, but she will be sorely missed. Huge person, just of presence there. I mean, she's been there for so many years at Tualatin High School. So congratulations for her.
And I'm glad that both of you are the leaders that you are and the creative people that you are. I know that you'll figure out a way to keep the momentum going for your group in this virtual world. So thank you for that.
Okay, I want to again thank you guys, and we will segue Director Rose to the second one. But I do want to do a quick hello to Eddie. I see that you're here, and we'll finish recognition and good news, and then give you a moment to introduce yourself and let us get to know a little bit more about you. But I just wanted to say hello and welcome. Okay, Director Rose.
All right, I am excited to be able to share with you. We have 4 educators here this evening to give you all their take, their impressions, observations, successes, and opportunities from the first 2 weeks of school. So we're going to start out with the littles. We have Rachel Bates here from Templeton Elementary. She's a kindergarten teacher, and I do want to call out that Principal Ferguson shared with us. She is homegrown. She came up through Templeton, Tualatin, and graduated from Tigard High School. And now she is back working her magic as a kindergarten teacher. A couple of these folks that you're going to hear from this evening, you read letters from parents about last week. So we're happy to have you meet them and hear their thoughts. So I'll start with you, Rachel.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me here to speak tonight. The first 2 weeks of school have been overwhelming. Teaching in a new way is unsurprisingly hard and frustrating. With so many unknowns and changes, I have often struggled with the lack of control that I feel. However, there have also been some incredible positives over the last 2 weeks. Although we are meeting virtually, I am already in awe of my students. Every year, I learn so much from them. I can tell this year will be no different. As a teacher, I have felt pressure to be prepared for the unknown, an impossible task, but I'm already seeing how, although it has been exhausting work, my team and I have pushed ourselves to be better and are making a difference in these students' lives. I already incorporate a lot of visuals into my teaching, but this year has taken that to a new level. I have icons for Google Meets, course cards, and maybe most importantly, the mute unmute icon. The Templeton kindergarten team also had a community member donate 5 books to every kindergarten student. When I read one of those books, my students love to get their copy and follow along at home. I know these books are special to all of them, and it helps to create a sense of togetherness even when we are separated by a screen. Although this work continues to be challenging, I know that at the end of it, I will be a better teacher, both virtually and in person. I have also been very fortunate to have a class full of families that have been incredibly kind to me despite the stress and pressure parents are feeling. I believe much of this camaraderie was built through our Connect meetings before school. Having these Connects as your first meeting ensures that these relationships start off in a positive way. That is an important aspect every year, but especially this year when we are coming into families' homes through cameras every day and asking our families to support their students in ways they never have. I have been lucky enough to have families reach out and tell me how much their students are enjoying coming to school, how they love the songs we are singing and the puppets who come to help us with math and reading. Most of these messages are just a PS at the bottom of an email, but these are the messages that let me know we are doing the right things for our students and tells me how important live instruction, even virtually, is. Our students know that they are loved and cared for and want to be with their teacher. And I believe as long as we keep building those connections, that the learning will happen too. Thank you for having me here tonight.
Thank you, Rachel. Next, we have Amy Martin from Metzger Elementary. She is a learning specialist there. Amy?
Hi, yes, learning specialist at Metzger. I thank you very much for having me. I decided to just jot down some opportunities and successful moments that we've had. First, as Rachel mentioned, all elementary teachers had connect meetings with individual families at the beginning of the first week of school. And I was able to attend those meetings for all the students on my caseload. So it was a great opportunity right away to start collaborating and communicating with parents and teachers. I've also had the opportunity to work real closely with the basic needs teams at Metzger and supporting our families on many different levels. We always strive to have a partner with, well, we always strive to partner with parents, but this virtual setting actually provides many opportunities for this partnership to be stronger, as there is a constant communication between school and home. And I feel that this setting has increased the involvement of parents in their child's education. We also have a better understanding of families' cultures and norms while we're serving kids as they learn at home. Another positive or good opportunity is during classroom morning meetings each day, I have been able to check in on all my students, which in a normal school day, that usually doesn't happen. And I can easily pop into their Google Class Meets. I can see who's there. I can see if they're participating, how they're interacting, and then do a quick check-in with that progress with parents and teachers as needed. A big success, I feel, is I had some students that we barely saw in the spring. And after many phone calls and home visits, we were able to get them connected, walk through all the steps so they knew how to navigate Canvas, and they're in their small groups and they're in their classrooms every day. Another success is that we have some students with behavior needs in a brick and mortar school that have actually been very much more engaged and successful in this virtual setting. And then last, like all the teachers, I was really nervous to start using Canvas and teach live, but it really, considering that we're doing the best we can, it's been amazing. Seeing students, seeing their faces and how happy and excited they are to see these familiar faces, to see assistants, to see their friends. It's been very filling for them and for their families. And then in talking to families, they've said that they even see their children light up, and that these small group friends are familiar and very exciting for them to see their friends and be in that small group each day. So thank you again for having me.
You're on, you're muted, Tracy.
Oh, first time. Okay. Next up, we have Josh Morris, who is a TWE language arts teacher at Fowler Middle School. You also read about him last week.
So before Josh, you start, I think we need those mute and unmute icons.
Yes, we do.
Okay, I'm done.
Good evening. I just wanted to thank everybody for allowing the space for the teachers to kind of share out some of these things that are happening. So thank you, everybody. I really wanted to just kind of start by sharing out that it has been a difficult, it has been a difficult beginning. Learning Canvas has been pretty difficult, and I know a lot of teachers are continuing to work really hard with it and trying to get around it. But with that said, I have to say that I've never seen, in 12 years of teaching, I've never seen teachers come together, and the outpouring of creativity and collaboration is, I couldn't be with better people right now. The team that I've been able to work with, I have to say, at 6th grade level has been incredible at Fowler Middle School. I'd only have great things to say about them. The coaches, wow, it's the work that they have put in. The tech coaches is just it's really unbelievable to know how much they've put in. I know they've put in blood, sweat, tears, and hours of doing videos and trying to create systems to make it all a little better. And it's been so nice to be able to see my students, you know, be able to be in this setting that, you know, sometimes is even more intimate than a classroom. I mean, I'm in their living room, I'm in their bedrooms with them there. It's, you know, parents are there with them at times, and it's nice to finally be able to be face to face with them again. We've really missed our students. And really it's, you know, we're coming around to, I think, starting to figure out how Canvas is really going to work. I think it really has been a challenge, but we're in that space that we're learning it and we're getting better at it. And we have a lot of teachers just willing to help out and willing to help everybody else. Just want to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to just give you a little bit of what's going on. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. We're going to round this off with high school with Principal Michael DeLurba from Tualatin High School.
First off, shout out to all the teachers that came in and spoke before me. Your story resonates. It's a very similar story to what I've heard from our high school folks who have just really been working hard to learn Canvas and to get familiar with setting up their courses in Canvas. It was a big lift for our staff, but they've done it really well. I've been going into classes today in the 9th grade classes and spending some time with focus students like we do every single year. And I've been asking them about their experience, and they've said there's a very clear set of expectations about what they do every day, knowing what their schedule is, being able to come in and know exactly where their classroom Google Meets link is in the Canvas, what assignments and discussions are coming out. It's just, it's a much more predictable environment for our students is what I'm hearing from our students. And that's a big marker. And that was not easily attained. Our teaching staff across all levels had to learn on the fly, and they've done it marvelously. Really impossible feat that they've accomplished. Some other great positives. We've started our 9th graders out on I think on a positive note. We had a welcome back to the PAC night just last week for community members. And then also during the first week of school, we had our kind of student PAC leader day. So we had 9th grade breakout groups, and there were some technical problems as we went along, but it was still a chance to try and do some of the things that we do with students in person, virtually, and the feedback from students has been really great. We handed out thousands of textbooks last week at both high schools, checking them out by name to students, you know, running out to cars, and you know, a lot of shout outs to our classified folks, secretaries and librarians and security folks and volunteers who came out to help us hand out textbooks at both schools and supplies for courses. It's been a pretty amazing opportunity to get materials to students for our normal classes. We really, one of I think the big celebrations is, despite all the limitations of COVID, we really have not pared down our offerings. Students are still taking pretty much the same classes they took when they were in person, at least at Tualatin High School, and I know it's true at Tigard High School too. So I'm just very excited that as students get into the rhythm of distance learning and comfort distance learning, they're going to find the rigor that we've always expected from our students in person at Tualatin High School. The other thing that I'm excited about is that we spent the first week of school really anchoring in relationship, and every student I've talked to, including Emily here, our board liaison, has talked about that was really apparent. And that intent is apparent. I think in this virtual environment, developing those communities in our classrooms is so important. And for our staff to commit to taking that time to do that up front before easing into content this week has been a good lift for students. And I think it shows in our attendance. I was looking at our attendance every day, and you know, we're right around 3 or 4% right now that we're still trying to chase down. That's pretty remarkable considering what sort of drop off we saw in the spring. So I'm very excited about these beginning markers, and I know Tigard is too. As I talked with Brian most every day, and that. But more importantly, we are really happy to see our students coming and leaning into being in their courses and opening up to their teachers and just building a great community as we move forward in this virtual environment. So thank you again for allowing me to come in and speak on behalf of our staff. And just one more time, shout out to the teachers out there. You guys are amazing. I'm married to one, and I see what you're working through on a daily basis, and I just so appreciate the constant care you have for our students.
Thank you, Michael. And I'll just open it up for board members. Questions, comments, kudos.
I am just in awe. I mean, I always knew we had phenomenal teachers, so it doesn't really surprise me that staff is just figuring out Canvas and going with it and working their tails off to make it work, because that's what you guys have always done, right? But I am extraordinarily appreciative, and I really am in awe of how much energy and thought and care has gone into this, because I know a lot of our teachers have their own kids screaming around them at home, and so teaching a class when you got a 3-year-old running around your legs or the cat running around your legs, it's tough. And so I just want to say thank you so much.
I have a couple questions, and I'm curious the perspectives from the different levels here. So one, we know one of the big problems in the spring was inability to reach certain students who lacked Wi-Fi access or who lacked other resources to connect. Can you all share maybe one or two people from your experiences? Are we having those same difficulties? Are we able to reach most students pretty frequently? Curious what the perspective is from spring to today and in terms of reaching those students.
I think that's
sorry.
That's something I can speak to quickly, and then I'll let Rachel jump in. That is data we're tracking on the daily. We have our support teams that we started in the spring, our distance learning support team, and also our re-engagement teams. And they have been going through some exhaustive training around a strong home visit process, just making phone calls and tracking those students down early on. I think I was really encouraged by the data early on that we have a much larger percentage of students coming, not just daily, but also at least 1 to 2 periods a day, so that that we know who those students are right away now, and we're able to jump on them pretty quickly. But that also is a major shout out to our basic needs team, who over the summer did a lot of tracking down communications with families and having some listening sessions with certain affinity groups and really hearing what the needs were, and so that we're able to get resources to those people much quicker now than when we first started in the spring. So I'm feeling really great about the systems that we have in place, and I know that we're already looking at data even a week in.
I just wanted to share because I only see the classroom aspect of it, but I had 3 days last week, I believe, where I had 100% of my students attend all live sessions, and I have a class of 17 this year. And yeah, it was amazing, and it was awesome, and it was so exciting to see, because that does show me that they're able to access Canvas and get onto our live sessions. They have internet and access to that, and that they also have buy-in, like that they want to be there and be participating in those live sessions.
From the middle school, like from Fowler Middle School, what I've noticed is definitely there's a greater buy-in from the students right now at this moment. The kids want to be there. From the technical side of lack of internet, I think we've done a much better job at providing internet to the people that needed it. And also I know that our team at Fowler, I can speak for them, are, working tirelessly, reaching out to the kids who aren't. I mean, we're, keeping track of it very closely, and, if someone is not there, they're checking in on the house and seeing, hey, what's going on? Why is someone not there? So definitely a more cohesive plan, I would feel, than what we had in the spring.
And I would just add that just the engagement and interaction of the live instruction and students feeling to see each other is a huge buy-in at the elementary level as well.
So I appreciate all of you coming and just keeping us kind of informed. And I saw the article, Amber Fields, her and her daughter in the, I don't know if you guys saw it in the Bulletin, Tiger Times. And Amber's quote is saying that she's never seen so much collaboration before. And I think just listening to you all, it sounds like that's a common denominator, is just extreme collaboration. I contrast to how like the high schools hardly ever talked to each other 5 years ago, right? So it's great to see that. But one of the questions I do have is going forward, and then maybe what you just said in terms of attendance, I saw a little concern in some of your voices that, yeah, right now it's great, but long term, right? Because as interest wanes, especially after Christmas. So I'm just curious, what do you see as a challenge moving forward?
One thing I can think of is just some different behaviors that are already, like the honeymoon's over, and there are some different behaviors that are starting. And I think the challenge will be working with those parents and making sure that they have the incentives and the tools at home to, continue to have their child be successful online.
I would add to that, just continuing to morph how we instruct. So, speaking for my first grader who's at home, and I'm thankful enough that my wife is an educator and she's working right alongside her, but there's just no substitution for that over the shoulder work when it comes to literacy. And I just know that that is something that is on everyone's mind. And then also at the secondary level, keeping our engagement up and helping students work through this compacted schedule, because we've gone to a 4x4 model where now they're doing a whole, semester worth of work in a shortened amount of time, and they have 9 weeks to finish semester's work. So just how do we help them navigate that process, and how do we keep adjusting all of our pacing that's been so established over time with a brand new model? So I think that's a big challenge for us moving forward, is making sure that we're still meeting all of our high standards, but at the same time working for compacting in a differentiated curriculum.
I would agree on the younger side. When I think about teaching my students reading, I've never done that virtually before. And I always think about those small reading groups and how we will get that really good quality instruction in a virtual model. I also think about how I'm going to track their growth this year. That's something that I know has been a big conversation with my team, is how do we assess and monitor and watch their progress that they're making virtually.
Just quickly, I thought that one of the things that I can see is the fatigue setting in, and what do we do with that fatigue of how do we keep the teacher spirits up as well? It takes a lot to lesson plan creative things that can actually get interaction. And I think when we're planning with teachers, we need to be careful that we're not just overloading teachers with new tools or new things that they have to learn, and giving them space to collaborate and be able to develop great lesson plans. And, I just for myself, I know, and speaking from what I've heard other teachers, is there's a fatigue of new tools right now. And so, that a lot of teachers feel like, I've learned so many things, I can't hear one more thing. And I think we need to be careful with that going further. We need to back off of like, here's another thing you can do and another thing, and instead allowing space that teachers can collaborate on what's working, what are things that we can already do with what we have. So I think going forward with that would be really helpful.
Thank you, everyone. That's really helpful. Appreciate your insight.
Director Emerson, any questions, comments? Okay. Well, again, I thank you all, and I appreciate being honest about the challenges too. And to all of you on, I think about that. How do you kind of over animate to connect in this virtual space versus what you could do when you're together? The behavioral concerns, attendance engagement. I love the conversation, Rachel, about assessment. We were just talking about that, as I know Dr. Ricky Smith and her team are. So we'll be curious and excited to hear how you think that will be successful in this year, because as you might imagine, we're really interested too, and you all are the experts in trying to figure out how we really measure success. And to Josh, to your point, right, that's going to be a lot of different ways on how you just manage, this is enough for now, and let's stretch and grow, and then go again. It's kind of like when you're building up a muscle and you kind of have to break it down and then, build it back up again. So, so I appreciate that. This is just unique times, and how many times have we all said that? So appreciate you guys taking time out of your resting time to come speak with us. And the upside is you can hit a leave button and then you get the rest of your night instead of driving from Hibbard. So board members, any other questions or comments?
Thank you all, and keep up the good work. We really appreciate it.
Truly, thank you all. So Director Rose, is that, or okay, all right. So you truly are all free to hit the leave button. So thank you all very much. So great recognition and good news this evening, with some honesty on, what are those next steps that we need to be mindful of as we continue with school. So from that, we will move to our student representative reports. And Director Bowman or Director Emerson, if either one of you would like to do an introduction for Eddie, and then we'll have Eddie start since he is just beginning with us, and then we'll go to Rowan and then Emily to give their high school reports. So welcome, Eddie. So Director Emerson or Director Bowman?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. Yes, this evening we have Eddie Aguillon Rincon, right? Rincon?
Yes. Hi, my name is Eddie, and I am a student from Creekside Community High School. This is something that is new to me. I am stepping out of my comfort zone to help support our district and give my opinion as much as I can. And I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in and say Eddie had an exceptional interview with Karen and I. He comes with a ringing endorsement from Russ at Creekside Community High School. And I think along with Rowan and Emily, we are not going to have shy board members this year representing the high school. So Eddie, welcome, and congratulations on your selection. And we're really excited to work with you.
Thank you very much.
And Eddie, I also want to welcome you. I don't know if you remember, we worked together on, I don't know what that structure was in that building class, but I met you at that time at Creekside. We were building something. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, good to see you and welcome.
Thank you very much.
So yes, Eddie, and please always reach out, Director Emerson, Director Bowman, really to any of us if you have questions. Russ is also just a tremendous mentor on, I remember him working with Surma on things to share and bring into this space during board meetings. So definitely, and I love that you were honest about kind of pushing the envelope on your own comfort zone. Please know that we are here for, as Ben said, good conversations, challenging conversations, but we welcome your voice, and it is always respected, and truly all you guys do an outstanding job. So with that, I think I said Rowan was next. So Rowan, take it away.
All right, yeah. So I guess 2 weeks into school, the main takeaways that I have are we still have good attendance, which is definitely good. And students, I think, are definitely getting more comfortable with the systems. It's still not perfect. There's still a lot of times when either students or teachers are trying to figure stuff out, as we would expect. As I'm sure the district knows, we did have, I think, 2 days where Canvas went down. And so it was not during class time, I don't think, but I'm not sure if there's much we can do with that, but that does hinder stuff. So just making sure that we have, systems, if that were to happen for a whole school day, then I would think that it'd be very necessary to have some other way to connect teachers with students. So that's one thing I would be worried about. Some other things with Google Hangouts, the way that teachers, like, I know, or I think there's a breakout feature similar to Zoom maybe. I haven't actually used that at all. I think most teachers are just creating different Google Hangout rooms, and then that seems to work. I'm not exactly sure what goes on with breakout rooms, that teachers don't like using it or it doesn't work well, but that's something. But using multiple Google Hangout rooms has worked to have smaller group discussions, which enables students to participate more. Not a whole ton to change. It's been going pretty well.
Thanks, Rowan. Any questions for Rowan, you guys, or we'll go right into Emily. Emily, thanks, Rowan, so much.
So participation has been consistently high in classes. Well, not participation, but attendance has been consistently high in classes. Participation has not. Is still very low, and I think the unmuting is still a hurdle for us to get through. We still have some awkward silences. Students have reported that the long hours of screen time is really taking a toll, and that students are getting headaches and eyes are sore. Even with the 15-minute break in between, it's still really tough on us to just sit there and stare at our screen for an hour. We started Tualatin ASB. We started a weekly video series for 15 minutes during the 15-minute advisory period on Mondays, and that has replaced our daily morning assignments, announcements. And yes, breakout rooms has been a hit or miss. Some are saying it's helpful and friendly and productive. Some have been complete silences and students not turning their cameras on and not wanting to unmute themselves. But teachers have been very open to constructive input and adjusting their teaching styles to their classes. I also think teachers are trying to balance the class time of teaching for an hour with time for building relationships. So it's been really hard, obviously, to connect with students. And I think that because now we have that compressed schedule, they don't really know how much they're supposed to teach, or when they're supposed to allow time for students to talk and discuss. And because they've been really open about the fact that they've had to compress their schedules and our curriculum, we've been a little bit hesitant to maybe have some of that free time. And then on the extracurricular side, some sports have started practice. And that's all I have for the report.
So Eddie, now that you at least got a little bit of a sampling from Rowan and Emily on kind of their feedback, you're welcome to share, if you'd like, your experience at Creekside, as they've also kicked off school. Eddie, you're still on mute, bud.
At Creekside, everything's going great. I know one challenge for us is attendance, because it is an alternative school and it is to help students more in depth with what they need. So usually classes are smaller at Creekside, but usually they're around like 7 students in each class. We are trying to contact students and help them like join class, and it's just a struggle because it's even without virtual learning, this was a problem. So I know Russ has been contacting some families as well. So
Thank you for sharing. And I'm sure that you guys will keep us abreast as we continue on how things evolve. With that, board members, any other questions? Okay. So from there, we will go to Superintendent and Board Communication, Dr. Ricky Smith.
Thank you, Chair. This evening, I would like to share three things with our board and community. The first is a summary of findings regarding the anonymous Instagram posts alleging district staff failed to respond appropriately to student reports of sexual harassment, sexual assault, rape, or grooming behavior. The executive summary found the following. In evaluating the Instagram stories together with subsequent specific information provided anonymously by the authors, parents, and staff, it appears that student reports of sexual harassment, sex abuse, rape are appropriately addressed within the buildings in adherence with state laws, district policies, and procedures. The data indicates that staff documented student reports, contacted school resource officers, implemented student conflict agreements, i.e. non-contact orders, and routinely referred students to counseling support. The lack of printed information, however, regarding the district policies, procedures, federal and state laws, and counseling resources to provide to student victims and parents created confusion, unrealistic expectations, and general dissatisfaction. In tracking the student reporting process within buildings and evaluating the data, the external investigator noted two system deficiencies. The first is what appears to be a lack of a central repository or record system confirming that staff made mandatory reports pursuant to ORS 419B. Although law enforcement officers were involved at some level in most cases reviewed, the investigator was unable to obtain a copy of a completed mandatory report form for the incident. The second issue is the lack of availability of Title IX sexual misconduct incident reports. Staff indicate that Title IX reports were routinely electronically filed via Synergy and forwarded to ODE, but the investigator was unable to obtain a copy of a Title IX incident report or a blank form. Actions then that need to be taken by the Tigard-Tualatin School District. 1. Title IX trainings as updated by federal law for Director Debbie Ebert, HR, and additional staff at all levels. 2. A centralized location for all Title IX documents in the HR office. 3. Additional printed material for victims and survivors who report to our staff or Safe Oregon. This will give a reference to victims and survivors to be available when resources are needed, immediately or later. This would also give a place to explain the difference between on and off-campus investigations and follow-up. In addition, a clear explanation of due process rights of those accused of sexual violence and/or harassment. 4, increase follow-up with all students and their families who are involved either as a victim, survivor, and/or complainant, or respondent and/or perpetrator. 5, continue to educate and encourage our students to report to staff or Safe Oregon. Additional remedies to pursue. 1, review how the district responds when there are incidents of sexual violence in our school communities. A team of counselors, school psychs, principals, and cabinet members will begin this work on September towards the end of this month to review current policies, practices, and best practices. 2, create a working partnership with SARC, which is the Sexual Assault Resource Center, and CARES to support students impacted by sexual violence and/or harassment at the school, in our facilities, and outside of school. They could also provide training for our counselors and administrators on response protocols and strategies for our students. 3, in compliance with Senate Bill 155, The district will be instituting mandatory training for all students on sexual harassment and sexual misconduct, which is the terminology used in the law. Resources will be reviewed by various stakeholders regarding students. This is a required piece. However, more preventative education on healthy student-to-student relationships will also need to be implemented. Students need to understand their rights and obligations in relationships. 4, increase follow-up and accountability with no contact orders, including a schedule change as needed year to year, and employ a no contact order during ongoing investigations to ensure the safety of all involved. Part of a no contact order will be a frequent check-in from administrators and/or counselors to ensure that the no contact order is working for both parties. 5, consider a cultural lens and utilize cultural supports when students of color are involved, as well as students with an IEP when investigation and follow-up. Second, this evening, just a reminder, and Emily, thank you for sharing that some students have already begun to engage in OSAA Phase 1 conditioning. That is to begin today and will continue throughout the week at both Tigard and Tualatin high schools. Student athletes either have been or will soon be contacted by their coaches regarding times for Phase 1 conditioning sessions this week and going forward. And last, in closing my remarks this evening, as we begin another year, continue to be anchored in remarkable community, state, and national contexts, TTSD affirms the following. 1, the district continues to be committed to academic excellence and high achievement for all students. 2, that to support high levels of learning and academic success, students must feel emotionally strong and safe if they are to stretch their capacity to take on rigorous learning. Up until the COVID outbreak last year, the work of the district was centered on understanding our students' social and emotional needs and developing district systems and structures that affirm that we saw every student by race, culture, and need. This work was and is essential to creating conditions that fully engage every student in instruction and that will ultimately accelerate their learning towards our goal that they have a clear path and plan forward for post-secondary baccalaureate study and/or starting a career of their choosing. 3, that our schools are community centers where students of all races, cultures, identities, beliefs belong and should feel welcomed. Specifically, a student's social, religious, and political beliefs, whether conservative or liberal, are encouraged as they enrich, not diminish, the instructional experience. If a student experiences other, they and/or their parents should first discuss that concern with the teacher and certainly with their school's principal. 4th, the TTSD believes in community process and input. Student and parent feedback is both welcomed and valued as we work towards continuously improving every student's learning experience. In TTSD's continued pursuit of academic excellence, beginning in October, District Community Communications will provide parents with information throughout the school year focused to understanding the assessments for learning that teachers use with their students, to understand the student's current baseline knowledge of core subjects such as math and reading, as well as, and this is important, their rate and level of learning that will guide instruction that produces academic growth throughout the year. And you certainly heard examples of that this evening from our teachers. 2, tips for parents for building a strong partnership with their teachers, their students' teacher or teachers, regarding their students' academic performance and steps to promoting academic growth throughout the academic year. 3, data updates provided not just to the board, but to the community as a whole regarding student growth and achievement by level, school, and district. As you heard this evening, our teachers are highly engaged and working hard to create exceptional learning experiences for all our students in beyond challenging conditions of a pandemic that continues to rage. I have no doubt that we will navigate current challenges successfully because we are collaborative and a united community of educators committed to excellence of outcomes for all of our students, regardless of the circumstances in which we do that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Riki Smith, for those updates. Board members, do you have anything that you would like to share this evening?
I don't have anything to share, but I would like to ask Dr. Sue a question about what you just said. So when you talk about sharing achievement data with the community, how do you envision that? What does that look like?
I think it is basically a return potentially to our data dashboard concepts that we had, many districts had many years ago when we were under the No Child Left Behind, but this is different this time. This is not necessarily focused to the way in which data was used previously, which was relative evaluative of the system, but relative to us understanding how our children are, how our students are growing. And even in extraordinary circumstances, such as the ones we find ourselves in, but that every student is, and we're going to talk about that this evening when you get to your board goals, and looking at the assessments for learning, that, this is the benchmark here, our baseline. And when we get to the second benchmark, how much growth does that show, or a shift in learning as the rigor increases? And then again, by the third benchmark, where are we? And we have a number of new items this year that we are using, not piloting, but we'll be using iReady Math and iReady Reading, which will also provide teachers that information that they need relative to where is the student now, and what's the next step that the student needs to take in terms of growth towards excelling academically.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stu, for that statement. I think that was very comprehensive and appreciated. I have a question that's semi-related to all of that. That I know you're tracking the COVID numbers pretty carefully, but just any sense from you on what the latest numbers mean for us, or timing on K3, or any sort of COVID-related update from you?
Yeah, and thank you, Director Bowman, for that question. Certainly none of us, I think, are excited about the fact that the numbers are now beginning to trend up following, which unfortunately, I think any of us could have predicted given the impact of the Labor Day weekend. And then certainly as our youthful charges have gone into their post-secondary careers and have unfortunately not made the choices that we might hope as part of their beginning their college careers. There's been a great deal of conversation both on the Washington County and Clackamas County sides with superintendents relative to can we get to the K3 metrics and begin slowly introducing kinders first. Because again, you've heard some of the challenges this evening trying to engage kinders relative to online learning, even if we could do it in more of a limited in-person model, which would be even smaller cohorts of 10 for no more than 2 hours. Can we model that and do that in a way that does not create an outbreak? And I don't think it's missed on anyone that the Oregonian over the weekend reported 4 school districts that had already had outbreaks, none of which were related to in-person instruction opportunities, but came from the external community. And so put a stick in their wheel, if you will, to being able to move forward. I do wish to commend Oregon Department of Education, which is now gathering weekly data from every district relative to how much in-person are you able to do and what are your current COVID numbers. I think that they are working hard to differentiate where are the outbreaks and how we can still get to more in-person time. But our goal is certainly to incrementally move in that direction, K3, and then as we add each layer to that based on metrics, then continue to hope that the metrics will drop so that we can get to grades 4 through 12 for in-person learning. But we provided you 2 weeks ago at the last board meeting with a plan for limited in-person, and that has begun by invitation. And we will continue to push on that system, again, not putting anyone at risk, but striving hard to get to as much in-person as possible under the current conditions.
Thank you. I appreciate that information.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. You can go ahead. Oh, okay. I have a question of whether or not we are increasing our notifications about the district officials responsible for taking names of not names, but reports of sexual harassment following this report. What are we doing that, or is it just additional printed materials for victims and survivors?
No, I think it's all of the above, Emily, and that is part of the work of taking a look at the recommendations from the external investigation, and then determining how do we best do that so that we are actively closing loops with individuals who have filed complaints, and what makes it a little more complicated in this process is that if indeed there has been sexual assault, that then may well rise to the level of law enforcement and DHS reporting. And I think that is also part of the challenge, is how to close that loop. Because once a district has made that report, it is passed off to those agencies and it is for them to follow up. And so working with those agencies as to, can you give us feedback so that we can we close the loop with the individuals who filed the report.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Excellent question. Thank you.
Are you going, Maureen?
No, I was just
Okay.
doing that check-in. So
Okay.
go for it.
Okay. So I don't have a lot to report personally, just because I got back from vacation. Just last week was catching up with y'all. Accomplished a lot over a few days or a week. But I did want to make a comment about the investigation, and in terms of just thanking the district for taking it seriously, for your responsiveness as soon as it was discovered. And I appreciate that we did a thorough investigation, and even though it was anonymous, we tried our best to determine where they were coming from and the nature of the allegation. And lastly, just the opportunity to learn and to improve from it. So I just wanted to thank you, because I know the staff, I think, met on a Saturday, and that was that urgent. So I would just want to thank you, Dr. Sue, for you and your staff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Fox, and I agree. I as well appreciated here's what we can improve, and that already these are our next steps, and this is what we plan to do. So thank you for that. And I actually don't have anything to add at this time. So if we are oh, thank you, Director Emerson. You need to chime in there.
I was able to join virtually the Deer Creek and Mary Woodward PSO meetings. And it was a wonderful opportunity to see the dedicated groups of parents who want to continue the work of teacher appreciation, creating community events, and of course, fundraising. And they're being extremely creative about it and thinking outside the box, taking advantage of maybe drive-through parades or goodie bag distributions, virtual contests, but definitely looking for ways to engage their community. And it was fun to listen to them, like, what else could we do? What else? Because tradition is great and it's wonderful, but I think they're finding that trying these new things is fun and exciting. And so I appreciate them. And I appreciate that they know that they need to show that appreciation for all of their staff members. So should be good.
I actually have one more question, if that's allowed. Do you think, or not do you think, but will the district also be extending explanations of the internal process for complainants? Because it says here that there will be an explanation of due process rights for those accused of sexual violence. But I know that a lot of the reason why a lot of these reports are coming up right now is because perhaps there wasn't an explanation of the internal processes that these investigations were happening. So Is that
So,
something that the district will be increasing on? Okay.
So Emily, much aligned, if you remember the AR written to accompany the anti-bias and hate speech, which outlines a process. This is a conversation that Director Ebert and I have had about how we make sure that regardless of what the disciplinary issue is, that the process is the same and that the loop closing is the same to the best of the ability, depending on the nature of the incident. But basically, this is sharing. This is information I can share. This is information I cannot share either in terms of sexual assault, because there is an ongoing criminal investigation, in which case we step back as a district and allow law enforcement and/or DHS to do their work. And then typically they, at the end of that, if there is another role for the district to play, they will circle back with us and close that loop. But as to the outcome of that investigation and who it involves, only those that are directly involved with that situation would receive that information. That may not be made public, depending on the nature of the prosecution, if that is in play. And so that has to then play itself out in the public domain. But to the best of our ability, we want to align investigation and communication loops, regardless of what the infraction is, so that people feel that loop is being closed and they're getting the information that they should have and are allowed to have under law.
Right. I'm aware of the fact that FERPA, does not allow the district to reveal that information, but it says in our policy, or the policy, I don't know if we're addressing the unadopted policy, but that complainants are allowed to know when the investigation has been started and conclude. So is that information?
That's correct, and that will continue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for the follow-up questions. So I think with that, we will close our superintendent and board communication and move to public comment. Patty, are there any public comments?
There are no public comments.
Okay, thank you. Immediately close that and move to reports and discussions. And we start with Director Ebert on an enrollment update.
Good evening, Board Chair and Directors of the Board. You have an updated enrollment packet for this week. And I believe that you also have the supplementary materials that Maureen has provided in an additional spreadsheet. They aren't added into one, so I do believe they're two separate links, correct, in your packet? Okay. So do we have any questions, comments this week about enrollment and what we're seeing? Anything I can clarify?
It's not a clarification, Debbie, but I was just curious in terms of outreach by particularly our elementary, which makes more sense, right? The young students are going to be the most difficult to do your work while, and it plays out just by looking at the students that are not enrolled with, TTSD this year, that it's much more at the elementary level than it is at the secondary. So my question is, principals or our school administrative assistants, are they reaching out? What are we learning? And is it just the distance world is a challenging climate? So.
A little bit of everything, yes. So we got one report this week that was enlightening from Northwest Regional around homeschooling and the amount of homeschooling registrations through the ESD has really gone up in nearly every metro district that reports to the ESD. So that's one place that we predicted that we would see an uptick in our students being homeschooled and being registered through the ESD. We also know that, through our different elementary schools, that kindergarten and first grade are the grades where we have had a loss of enrollment. We have not set up a system yet to have our office staffs track down students who were enrolled the year before. We plan to do that. We're just trying to let everybody kind of settle in, and then we can do some more systematic consistency across all 10 elementaries to start a process of beginning that. Some schools have done some of that already, and will be able to give us that data fairly quickly. But no, we have not started a consistent system across all 10 elementaries to start calling and finding out where kids have gone.
Director Ebert, I noticed in the financial report that Director Moore pointed out that statewide enrollment in public school is down between, I think it was 1% and 5%. Have you had conversations with some of our neighboring districts to see if they're roughly parallel, or looked at our comparable districts in the Metro 14?
Yeah, I have. I meet weekly with HR directors from both Clackamas County, being that we have one school there. And then I meet bi-weekly with the Washington County HR directors. And except for our smaller districts in both Clackamas and Washington, we all have seen a significant drop in enrollment. And I think Dr. Ricky Smith even put in a report last week, just the variance between the Big Ten, the top 10 districts that have more than 10,000 students, that we all have seen a significant drop, and it's fairly consistent across all the larger districts. Yeah.
So do you have a fairly high degree of confidence that once the pandemic is done and we're all back to a brick and mortar school, that some percentage, perhaps even most of these students who are being homeschooled would come back to public school, do you suppose?
I would suppose. I mean, I would predict that we would absorb many of them back into our district. I do know that we've had a couple of schools tell us that enrollment is down due to people moving. So I also think the pandemic has affected families, and in terms of housing and stability with their families and employment and all the other reasons that, you know, that we're seeing in our world right now are affecting all of our families. So I have heard that from a couple of our principals who have done some work around trying to figure out where kids have gone. So we'll see. You know, I think that definitely we will get some kids back into our classrooms as we begin to file back on campus. But I think that there are a lot of factors at play here.
Kind of following up on that question, and maybe we don't have this information yet, and I think I probably know the answer, but do we have a sense of demographic data of the students who are not enrolled who were previously? Is the assumption that this is more affluent students or students who have parents who can teach them in homes, or is there a chance that it is folks lacking the resources to actually do the enrollment itself and lack that connection to the school, or do we just not know yet?
We don't know yet, Director Bowman, but that's definitely something that once we set up a system to track this data, we can definitely do that after we have it all.
Great, thank you.
And Director, if I might offer as well, what we are seeing is that the less affluent the district in the 10K districts, the fewer students they've lost in terms of enrollment. So I do believe that there appears to be that one of the causal effects could very well be the fact that parents can afford to pod or whatever, you know, homeschool or whatever else that they're currently able to do, versus those who are not and depend upon their school district for, you know, a number of supports and services. I would also add that as I shared with several directors, our biggest concern is that we want to make sure that the student is engaged in some form of learning this year. There have been reports nationally of people just sitting the school year out, and that causes me great angst as an educator, that we want to make sure that you connected somewhere with some form of learning during the school year, whether hopefully it would be with us, but if not with us, either that you are actively homeschooling or you have reached out to another provider, because that is a huge concern for us, for me personally, for us as a state, and certainly nationally.
Dr. Sue, just a follow-up question to that. Do you think that, have you heard of whether that's more of a elementary issue or high school, for example, if they're having to work to support their family or whatnot? Do you have any feelings?
Don't have a sense of that. It appears nationally that it's more at the elementary level. But again, data is really spotty and early, and I think it'll depend over time. In many ways, we have created, COVID has recreated the conditions of the Great Depression or recession that we went through again. And I think certainly the mobility and seeing people move indicates that. And then we have as yet to understand the impacts of wildfires in Oregon as well.
So I just have another question, but I did want to thank Director Ebert for just keeping us up to date. I actually reached out to a friend of mine who's works with a neighboring district and asked her about their enrollment a couple weeks ago, and she hadn't gotten any reports at all. So, so thank you. I just wanted to ask about Creekside Community High School and how their numbers are, quite a bit lower than the other high schools in terms of, and I guess intuitively, I would have think that would flip since it's a smaller school, more personal. And maybe Eddie has some insights. I don't know, but do you have any insights about why that might be?
Well, Creekside is a smaller school. I think it's about 700 students, usually like 20 in a class. But like I did say earlier, like Creekside is a school that kids are working on to showing up to class because they have, like in the past, they originally were from a normal school, like maybe like not normal, but like a different school, like Tualatin or Tigard, and they did transfer to Creekside, and the majority of the students that transferred did have a problem with attendance. So I know last year, Russ, our principal, did work on like having kids like on a certain program or whatever to help them come to school. But I feel like it is difficult right now since we can't really see the students in person, and the majority of the students that were on those programs or whatever are not showing up, and there's no way to contact them.
Director Fox, I'll just comment too. I just looked up enrollment the same time last year, and we were at 183. So we're not down terribly, actually, at Creekside compared to this time last year.
I guess it's just for dealing with the smaller numbers, so that
Yeah.
the percentage looks a lot bigger. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And thank you, Eddie, for your
help with
that as well.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else around enrollment this evening? We'll hope for continued good news.
Thank you, Director Ebert. Okay, the second item this evening on report and discussion is board goals discussion. This will be brief. The purpose of tonight is, as you all remember, we kind of identified the key areas of the goals that we wanted. From that, Dr. Ricky Smith and her team, the cabinet met and started working on specific assessments on how are we going to measure those goals. They have completed 2 of the cornerstones. So I think what I'm going to do is just kind of read the goals as we discussed at our work session. Dr. Ricky Smith, if you want to chime in anything specifically about that, please feel free to do that. Our plan will be at our next board meeting that we will have those goals, recommended measurements from Cabinet and Dr. Ricky Smith, and then we'll walk through it as a complete process. But I just wanted to make sure before we move forward that we all agree on the goals. So, so essentially the goals were in that category. What will the priority goal be for this year? So under achievement, you guys are following along in my word table. There were 3. Students across all levels and demographics are making academic progress and demonstrating growth during comprehensive distance learning. That is number 1. Number 2 is opportunity gaps are closing related to academic achievement and attendance. And I think you all remember we had a debate around attendance, whether that's academic or climate. I think it's both, but I think as we've already heard our teachers talk about engagement, participation, Emily talked about it. I mean, it's a huge factor in both. And then the third is students are engaged and actively involved in their classrooms, which again speaks to both Rowan and Emily talking about their experiences so far. So Dr. Ricky Smith, you want to share any kind of high level thinking on that? And then board members, if you have any thoughts, and then we'll move to the next one.
No, I think those are most appropriate relative to that cornerstone.
Okay, perfect. Karen looks like she's making copious notes over there. Thumbs up. Is that? Thank you. Okay. All righty. And then we will move to equity. And again, with equity, there were 3 parents are active partners in their students' education. Second one is students have access to resources essential for success during the COVID-19 crisis. And then early learning programs thrive and reduce the opportunity gap for students enrolled in our programs. Does that fly for everybody? Okay, all righty. And then moving on to talent, there were 4. Hiring and training for Department of Equity and Inclusion are completed and the team is empowered to take action. Second one, strengthen the educator pipeline by actively recruiting from our own team. Third is TTSD maintains buildings that promote wellness during COVID-19, engages with staff so all thrive in a distance learning environment, and offer resources to encourage mental health. And I think that we heard that from our teachers this evening on just the amount that's happening already as they try to launch into distance learning. And then the 4th, building a workforce that is reflective of our students is critical for student success. Retention of these staff members will be prioritized when budget shortfalls require a reduction in force. Additionally, TTSD will be known as a workplace that values and promotes a culturally diverse staff. Questions, comments? That one's a mouthful, but very important. Okay, and then the final is climate and culture. There are 2. The EASH plans will be effectively implemented in our schools, which of course is educate, accountability, solutions, and healing. And then the second one is all parents, community members, and students are receiving critical information in a timely manner, and the district is responsive to community members' questions and concerns. Students are supported and thrive in the district comprehensive distance learning or hybrid environments. And those are the big ones for this year. Any thoughts as we kind of walked away from the details, or are we good to go?
I think we're good to go. I worry on that one about effectively implement the EASH plans. What constitutes effectively? And how are we going to measure that? And so I just, as we move into that, I've been mulling it over and I can't find what it should be. So I don't know if anybody else has been mulling that over and has come up with an aha. I would love to hear it.
That's a good question, Director. I think what comes to mind for me is one of the consistent themes was uniformity of implementation and how different it looks at different schools. So I think that's one clue that we'll look for effectiveness is how similar does implementation look in at each school. So I think that's a big part of it. And then just fidelity to what the policy says. Are all the components there? Is the data collection complete? you know, when I love the update from Dr. Sue, that kind of in the board report that said, here are the instances that have happened so far, here's the processes that were followed. That kind of data, I think, is what we can use to evaluate.
Okay. So Director Zwerchman, I mean, those are great points, Jill. So I can noodle trying to be more specific instead of using the word effective, which could mean a lot of things to different people. Or we get that clear in the measurements, right, to Ben's point, and then that becomes how we account for that. So, but great feedback. So thank you for that. So any other thoughts?
I wanted to share my thoughts about Canvas and having parents be active partners. Maybe it's just because we opened up Canvas to parents where maybe we wouldn't have done that with another, if we were brick and mortar. But I have been able to see more work from my boys than ever. And it's been wonderful. I signed up for every notification, so I get everything that it's been assigned, it's been graded, it's been turned in.
I'm sure they love that, Karen.
Well, I know, I figured I would change them later, that I just, in the beginning, I wanted to see what I was getting. But being able to read what they're writing and turning in and seeing their math, and maybe it's just my guys aren't big sharers, but it's been good dinner conversation that I know what they're doing. So I know I've heard frustration from parents about navigating and everything, but I am hoping that they find similar benefits. And I did want to throw out earlier that the kiddos are doing art in the community, art of community. And so that came out too, that's a big part of Wednesday time. So I'm hoping that because we're releasing Canvas to the parents, that ends up being a really great tool to help them be active partners. So that's all.
So Karen, would you see that and maybe something how we measure? I don't know if we can measure parent, signups or participation, or just kind of a shout out that there's tools out there for the parents who want to, be more engaged.
Well, I kind of a shout out, but maybe there's a way. I feel like it's going to be more like a survey kind of thing, though. That right now we're hearing they're frustrated with navigation, and there's all these boxes on the screen, and they don't know what to click on when, or to find. They just want a to-do list, and there is a way to get a to-do list. But anyway, I think as they continue to figure it out, hopefully the feedback we'll be hearing is that it is a good tool to help them be engaged.
Okay. Very good. And then I know I'll look to Director Rose and Dr. Ricky Smith to kind of, you guys think about that, and what is a way for us to look at how we can measure family involvement as well. Because clearly that's as the year progresses, right? And as we've talked about concerns, as the days get colder, darker, faster, and enthusiasm starts to wane, how do we ensure kids are showing up for class? So, okay. All right. Well, with that, and again, we will get back in the weeds at our next board meeting when we walk through the assessments with Dr. Ricky Smith and her team. So with that, we will close reports and discussions, and we will move to our action items. And the first one on the agenda is TTEA, TTSD, Fiscal Agreement, Director Ebert.
All right, thank you. So in your packet, you do see the tentative contract agreement for 2021. These are financials only. As you know, in April of 2020, we started bargaining, and then that was quickly delayed due to COVID. We made the decision to just do a financial package for the 2021 school year. Once we headed into a little more understanding of how long COVID was going to have us home. So this is the exchanged proposals back and forth, what we ended on with TTEA. And as of Friday, the licensed teachers ratified their contract. with a vote of 98% yes, 2% no. That was with 12 minutes left when I checked with President Herron. But I'm confident we were, right in there at the same percentage at 4 o'clock when voting closed. So we turn it over to you, our board, for the final vote. Are there any questions about the agreement?
I don't have a question. I'm really impressed. I don't know that we've ever had a TTEA vote on a contract that was at 98%. I think that's the highest we've ever had by a lot. So that's very cool. That our teachers
We'll come back to the table this spring of 21, to bargain language and financials again. So
yeah,
gets us through the year.
Yeah. I'll take a win. I mean, I like it when I know that all of my teachers like the contract that has been put in front of them. Yeah.
I have a question about the retirement incentive package. Do we have any sense yet of what the projections might be for, how many employees are eligible and what we expect participation to be and what the savings from that will be? Do we have any sense of that yet?
We don't. We've done some quick blushes at, looking at the possibilities. But until we really have this out to our licensed teachers and marketed to them so that they understand it and what it is, I don't think that we'll have a really good idea of how many people will be interested. I've already gotten multiple emails of people that are, that have, read their contract. And I know that Scott has as well. So we'll work with those folks to answer their questions. And at the same time, we also have folks that, fall under the Evergreen package as well. And so just a reinvigoration of, do you realize that this is here for you as well, for the people that qualify for that package. So now that we have this, then Director Moore and I can get it out to everybody in a clear and concise way and answer questions and get people set up if they're interested. And then we'll be able to come back and let you know. We certainly know that we have many teachers that are at the top end of their career. And that, when we look at our curve of the age of our teachers and the years that they have in PERS and in our district or in education, that TTSD has teachers that, are very experienced. So that doesn't mean they're all, retirement eligible, but, we may have a couple handfuls of folks that are interested in learning more.
So Director Ebert, just for those that maybe aren't familiar with the term Evergreen Agreement, obviously that was an early retirement plan. Do you recall the year that was put in place? And then just to kind of get perspective of, how long that's been around. And
yeah.
That was also during another economic, that was, 2090, pick your recession, but again, that kind of purpose.
Yeah, I don't have the data off the top of my head, but I have
I'm pretty sure it's from the early 2000s. I want to say like 2003. Does that sound?
I have it right here. Here we go. 2001. Yeah. Yeah. So it's been a while since we've, offered something.
Yeah, and that was certainly a time of another, downturn. And so anyway, so thank you. Just wanted to give that perspective for those who wouldn't be familiar with the plan.
Sure.
And any other questions, board members, for Director Ebert? Okay.
I just want to say thank you to the team for negotiating the contract. I know that was a lot of work. It always is. So thank you.
Yeah, there's been a lot of collaboration back and forth between both our unions and the district It's just taken a lot of collaboration and teamwork together to not only move something like this, but the MOUs that we have put into place, and just getting together weekly and talking through so many of the reinvented ways that we are trying to do school. And it's just required a lot of conversation, a lot of clarification. And I really appreciate the collaboration and teamwork that has continued to come to the table every week to try and work through these issues. And then on top of it, trying to do these kinds of things as well. So it's been a lot for everybody involved.
I move that the Tigard-Tualatin School District Board of Directors ratify the 2020-2021 collective bargaining agreement, financials only, between the Tigard-Tualatin School District and Tigard-Tualatin Education Association.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded to approve the 2021 collective bargaining agreement between TTSD and TTEA as presented. Any further discussion? Okay, again, roll call. If in favor, signify by saying aye. Director Bowman.
Aye.
Director Emerson.
Aye.
Director Fox.
Aye.
Director Zertsme.
Aye.
And Director Wolf is an aye. Motion passes unanimously. And again, truly thank you, Director Ebert, Director Moore, and the team for all your work on this contract. So with that, we will move again to Director Ebert with second reading on board policy.
All right, in your packet, you have GBLA, disclosure of information. And this was a policy that Director Emerson worked with OSBA on. And Director Emerson, maybe would you be willing just to kind of summarize your conversation with OSBA and what you were able to accomplish?
Yeah, you might remember this is the one where the policy opened with talking about releasing information to a prospective employer, but then when you went through the list, not everything had to do with releasing information to a prospective employer. Mm-hmm. So Leslie was able to, as you can tell, rearrange and just end up making it a list of 3 different circumstances where information can be disclosed. And so there isn't any new language other than that leading sentence. But she did agree that as it was written, it was confusing. So she totally understood our confusion. And same with, was it GBL that we had in the consent agenda?
Yeah. So we put this on as an action item solely just so that you could see the amount of changes that were made. And I think the thinking was that we wanted to see the dirty copy and the changes that were there. And then Director Emerson, I wasn't sure if we were going to try to approve it tonight or do we want to put it on consent? So we'll need to make that decision, I guess.
I would say unless anyone has additional questions that would give us pause, that we just get her done. Okay, I just need a motion. Director Emerson.
I move to approve policy GBLA as presented.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded to approve policy as presented. Any further discussion?
No, just thank you, Karen. It's much clearer. Good job.
Yeah, truly, Karen. I really appreciate you doing the work to get in the weeds and get the policy organized. And OSBA probably appreciated it as well. So, so thank you.
I will admit I didn't expect quite this many changes, which is why I didn't want it to go into consent as a clean version, because I don't think you'd even recognize it if we just went to the list of 3, because it would look so different. But I just appreciate that Leslie admitted that, wait a minute, this is confusing, and that she was willing to make those changes.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Okay, again, roll call, signify by saying aye if approved. Director Bowman.
Aye.
Director Emerson.
Aye.
Director Fox.
Aye.
Director Zertsme.
Aye.
Director Wolf is an aye. Policy passes unanimously. And our final action item for this evening is the community-based organization focused on student leadership contract. Director Moore.
Good evening, Chair Wolf and members of the board. Director An and I are bringing forth a recommendation for a contract award for student voice and youth advocacy services as a result of a RFP we issued about a month ago related to securing the services of a community-based organization to partner in serving historically underserved communities. And we recently completed the process and are recommending a 2-year contract to be paid with the student investment account funds. And I'm going to leave it at that on my part and turn it over to Director An. I think she wanted to discuss a little bit about the process and the scope of work that we were looking for as part of these services. And it all started back when we convened our community under the Student Success Act process. So, Director An.
Thank you, Director Moore. Yes, I wanted to share a little bit about the process. As you all know, in winter 2020, we went through the Student Success Act, and at that time, the community prioritized equity initiatives and services, specifically supporting our communities who are historically underserved and underrepresented, as given feedback from our affinity groups, as well as our Black and Indigenous and Latinx, Latino communities, and our Pacific Islander communities. And so at that time, we were able to last week, last board session, connected with our family supports, and this time we were looking at services to activate and support our student youth voice. And so on August 31st, we issued the request for proposals for the scope of work listed here, knowing that we are in distance learning and knowing that there were some adjustments that we needed to make. We were looking for a partner that were willing to co-construct and had a collaborative stance given this scope of work. So the goal was to support staff pillar in cabinet and district leadership, and improving systems to utilize youth voice as drivers for decision making, staff pillar, supporting administrators and building equity coordinators to support their student pillar and creating more formalized ways of student feedback, and then also supporting our affinity group advisors. As we saw today, the benefits of having a coordinated effort to support affinity voice, not only lifting student excellence in advocacy and creativity and collaboration, which are all tenets of the four parts of the 4 C's of 21st century instruction. We're also looking at building the capacity of our equity department to utilize student voice and impact our school improvements as well, which I think will benefit greatly to our EASH plans. And then again, supporting our student affinity groups so that we have more culturally relevant and aligned staff. As you had heard from earlier, our BSU affinity groups, knowing that we want, students are wanting more staff to be culturally aligned and have similar mirror experiences. And then also, we wanted an organization that understood how to create bridges across affinity groups. I know that with this work, affinity groups are not the answer to equity, but it's a step forward so that we create safe spaces for communities to come together. But ultimately, our goal is to ensure our broader community is inclusive, and that requires that strategic alignment and bridging of student services and supports for students in our school community. So that was the process. We had we held the the submission process for about 2 weeks. We got one proposal, and we convened a community of 7 community members. We had an administrator, some family members, some staff, and parents. And we also extended the invitation to students as well. And the folks that were able to participate are listed here. And at the, we had the score, our proposal was from REAP, and they, the community members had high scores for their proposal, and were very impressed with the work that REAP had proposed. So that's part of the process. David, did you want to share anything?
No, I think you covered it. I think we're ready for questions and discussion and or action.
I'll open it up first, board members' questions.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
First, I was trying to figure out what level this might apply to, since a couple of the not the interviews, the resumes indicated elementary work. And so I know that it says that we'll determine the 2 sites for the second year, but do we have an early feel of whether we want them to be elementary, or are we just open to what the surveys indicate?
Well, actually, this year, we're really looking at building the capacity of, if we were to look at our equity pillars, we're really trying to build the capacity of our staff and student pillars this year. And so that's across the school. So like they would be working with our building equity coordinators, which include elementary staff as well, to support the affinity spaces that we're trying to cultivate at this first year, knowing kind of we're still at distance learning. When we were looking at sites, we were actually looking at our middle school program specifically, because they have the strongest, most coordinated affinity groups, and they have so we were looking at that, because then they can bridge the services for elementary and high school. And also, if we looked at our contract with ERCO, there and Latino Network, a lot of those services are actually in the high school level. So we would like to spread the love a little bit and give that to middle school.
Okay. Then I was also curious, how a student becomes a REAP student. Is it volunteer or invitation, or how might that process work?
So when you say when a student becomes a REAP student, you mean just who accesses the services and supports?
Right, for all these, like all the one-on-ones that they offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we will actually be able to talk a little bit more about that towards the second year, because part of this year would be evaluating, connecting with our infrastructure for our equity teams and our affinity groups. But it would be in the second year, when we're looking at placing in the middle schools, they would work within our MTSS process to look at which students would support the recruitment process, or would be part of the recruitment process. And I think, yeah, so there are some specific criteria that are listed around. We want students that are interested in leadership, and maybe have not had the opportunities to engage, and want that that mentorship and support from communities that are aligned with youth advocacy. Did you have any other questions?
That was it. Thank you.
Okay.
So Director, and I thank you for David and Director Moore and Director for answering many of my questions. I just wanted to ask a few, which we might want to elaborate on, and that, and I'm asking these questions because in my mind, this is a unique partnership. It's different than our Latino network. It's different than, in my mind anyway, IRCO. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but I wanted to delve in to understand those differences. And so I don't know, is it just my imagination? Because I wasn't here at the last meeting, but is this relationship a little bit different than our Latino network and our IRCO?
Yes, I would say so, because so some of IRCO's work was we expanded that with our family partnership, but there were contracts under Measure 98 where they had already had some partnerships with the high schools. We know that there were some successes, and so we wanted to expand that because really they were splitting 0.5 across three schools, 3 high schools, where we knew that that wasn't sufficient to really support families, support students. This particular organization is focused on youth advocacy and youth voice. So as you know, we've been, our goal is to really operationalize our equity pillars, and we've been working extensively to support our staff pillar and building awareness and having more solid equity teams and equity leadership. The next component of that really is the questions. How do we have a way of engaging student feedback? Do we have a way of using student feedback to make proactive decisions? Do we have a way of including students in decision making? And so a lot of those components are important. We've built a structure to create safe spaces. The next lift is really to how do we support students in building their advocacy skills to be partners in decision making. And so REAP has had a history of supporting that work, and even at the state level, they've hosted a lot of town halls with ODE and COSA and stuff like that. So they come highly regarded in that way. So that those are the pieces where I would say is a little bit different, and also they have their organization is like 97% individuals of color. And so one of the things that we heard from our communities was that they wanted representation that were mirrors to them. As we bring back the discourse tools, we want mirrors and sliding doors as opposed to just windows. And so we know that we're building our capacity to hire talent that is more representative of our demographics, but that might take a while. Whereas these are partners that we need desperately to be able to show our communities that we hear them and we see them and we're supporting them as they had requested in our listening sessions. We're closing the loop, I would say.
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation. That's really helpful. And I did spend some time just looking at REAP and who they are, and I actually made some inquiries to people I know, and it sounds like very positive things about the organization. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, so one of the questions I asked was, what framework does a model does REAP use to guide its programs? And you said critical race theory, social justice, youth development, and culture responsive education are their theoretical frameworks to inform their work. Can you elaborate on that for people who don't know what that is? And even me, I'm still trying to figure that out, right? So can you elaborate for us and for people myself and people who don't know what those things mean?
Yeah, so let me have those out real quick. So I can speak a little bit to critical race theory in that it's really, when we talk about culturally responsive teaching and critical race theory, a lot of that, there's a few components of it. Really, it's just talking about how do we ensure that when we make decisions, we take into account the things, the identity markers that are really important for students and families. And so, that's a part of critical race theory, social justice, youth development. I think it's that. So we've been doing a lot of work around, our equity framework as well. And I know that there's some questions around like anti-bias, anti-racist curriculum. And a major component of like any type of transformational change, specifically in the realm of education, being able to bring in, youth voice, because they are the experts of being youth. So to be able to anchor and honor that identity marker, as well as those who have other intersectional identities as race, gender, sexual orientation, all those components are all parts of, bringing youth issues at the forefront, and who else to build that that case and understanding than youth. And then for culturally responsive education, we know that to be able to really support our students, culturally responsive teaching and culturally responsive education really talks about anchoring in students and people's experiences as like catalysts for learning and connecting. So those are, I gave a little bit of each of the components. I don't know if that was enough. I'm happy to share more, but I feel like in this short time, that's what I can share. If there are any other folks that might want to share additional knowledge to that, I'm happy to hold space for that too.
I appreciate the explanation, I really do. And this is one of those moments that I don't want to put you on the hot seat, but I sincerely have questions, because I think as we implement, so the work's important, but the how is the sticky part, right? It's how we do it. And so one of the things that I guess I want to understand is, let's say there is a student of color or a student, a marginalized student who doesn't necessarily agree with the critical race theory or social justice youth development framework. In other words, it's not part of their belief system. How will REAP handle that? So when we're talking about youth advocacy and whatnot, if they have a different lens, different worldview, or what have you, how will REAP handle that student? What will be, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but if there's a clash in terms of worldview, then, and that's still a student of color, will they, I guess I'm trying to figure out, there's so much diversity even among students of color in thought and culture, religion, what have you. So can you help me understand how, since we are talking about advocacy, activism, I just want to ensure that REAP will embrace students of all belief systems, political affiliations, whatnot. So, so can you help me out with that? Again, I don't want to put you on the hot spot, but this is just, I think, an important discussion for just our community and this moving forward with this organization.
Yeah, what's interesting about that question, and it's an important one, is that when you think about, so I look at this as a layering, right? It's not that one part is a centerpiece and that like it can't be moved. I think it's because of the range of the different frameworks here, it's nimble and it's flexible and it's inclusive in that way. Because when you talk about culturally responsive teaching, you are really leaning into the center being the students, and so being able to create civil debate, being able to create environments that secure not just safe spaces, because really we're talking about courageous spaces with care. And so when I talk about our equity framework, it's really aligned to that, because if you hear the way in which we move our equity work, our goal is not to push people to the margins, to include people in the margins. Our goal is to spread those the range far and wide enough so that we wrap all our students in so that they know that they're seen and cared for. And so oftentimes when we talk about discourses and people get really nervous or scared about the word race because they've either not really talked about it or they have not really had the opportunity to flex their muscle around hearing and understanding other people's perspectives. So I think that's the beauty of them anchoring it also in culturally responsive teaching, because the tenets are one, building critical consciousness, right, and being allowing students and youth to be critical thinkers, and critical thinkers think beyond the dichotomy of one or two, or like, black or white, or like all these, and so it allows us to really focus on that. And so I think that supports that. And also in our criteria, we asked, what is your collaborative stance? And it explicitly highlights, are you able to adjust, adapt, and revise given the feedback of your students and your stakeholders? And they did a really good job responding to that. So I feel like they have a history of being models of inclusion and practicing that. So I feel pretty confident that they'll be able to adjust and adapt.
Okay. Thank you for that. So I don't want to hog the floor if other people have questions.
Well, Dr. Fox, I guess I just have maybe a comment, and then I guess a question as I think about Zinnia, as we just got done talking about what are our goals and what will those measurements look like, right? So as we think about the pillars focused on staff and their development, do we see kind of that outcome at the end, though, how that still impacted students through that staff development? And would that be a survey or because my mind is going in a couple ways. What are the district direction in terms of goals and what is our success? And I know we're going to have to do that for SIA anyway, right? Kind of lay out how we invested that money, what did we want to accomplish, and how did we do that? And so in my mind, I'm more focused on how will we know we're successful, and whether that's through the district framework, whether that's through SIA, whether that's through Measure 98, it's going to be a lot of lanes of tracking, but all those pieces are really important to kind of just know what bucket we're looking at and how we know we're successful as we build on those investments. So kind of acknowledging all the data we need to be collecting to know whether we're successful. And then back to how will we know after year one, with it to focus on staff development, that we've headed down the right track that will ultimately be successful for students. I don't know if that made sense. That was a lot of RAM.
Yeah, and I think with any initial, especially with this partnership, knowing where we're at in the current context, one of the things that I would see as points of measure that would be successful would be, given the heavy lift that we're asking schools to do with their EASH plans, and knowing that you can't do and follow through with that without student voice, family voice, and all those other components. I would say a measure would be, given the supports of REAP, our culturally specific partners like Latino Network and ERCO, who are the representatives in your school that are sitting on the advisory team for your EASH plans. That is a very explicit and measurable way of saying, did we meet our objectives or not for that? I think those are some pieces that we want to look at. And there are and have been, especially if we're looking at the programs that is being proposed for the second year, REAP has measurements and tools that we use to track to see if its progress is made, and then those are some parts that we could get to co-construct, right, upon the review. So and like I said, with the scope of work, I think there's a point of measure that you can include to each of those points of scope of work that I listed there.
Okay, and I will tell you, Zinnia, I've had the good fortune of sitting with REAP and many of their students in some of the OSBA work and listening to them. So I have no doubt that they effectively engage with students across the state, because I've been able to participate in that. So thank you.
Yeah, and I just want you to know, just as a already, Mark Jackson was, really excited to sit and chat, and so he's willing to connect as well if you have further questions.
So can I just follow up on another? So something we mentioned about, just respecting students' belief systems and what's the right word, and political views, and that because you're in a particular affinity group, that there's not a narrative that you have to believe to belong to it. And the reason I'm saying this isn't just hypothetical. These are actual feedback I'm getting from parents, some parents of color. And so I just want to ask, how are we going to prevent that from? So we have some staff standards in terms of our policies, GBG and IGDA, which is staff participation in political activities, and IGDA is student organizations. So are we going to hold REAP to the same standards as our staff in terms of just not pushing an ideology on our students, but letting them develop their own ideologies, and support the advancement of, support advocating for their own ideologies? Does that make sense? As opposed to a group coming in, because we've always tried to be protective of our students with our staff. And so I just want to, this is a new thing. We're bringing an outside organization to our school, and giving access to our students. So how are we going to protect them with regard to that? Does that make sense?
I think, David, you answered that, but when we, I don't think that would be a problem, because I think one of the things that the organization does is to anchor on the identity and the goals of the student. So it's really led by students, as opposed to it being led by the organization, I guess. So my apologies if I'm not fully understanding your question. I just feel like that wouldn't be an issue, because the whole, I think the framework of the social justice youth advocacy also is centered on the youth, and it's their perspective, as opposed to it being led by an organization. So I guess that's, I don't know, David or Dr. Sue, if you want to chime in. I don't think that's going to be an issue, because again, going back to the framework, it's centered on students.
Correct. And I believe again that Director Moore provided information as to our oversight, that this is a one-year agreement. And if we find that there are some concerns, we will have an opportunity to discuss that with this new partner, and if adjustments can be made to make them. And if they fail to be made, then we have a path forward as to not renewing that contract.
Well, is there any way we can embed those two policies? Because I know that in the contracts, it says they're accountable for all policies related to facilities and whatnot. Can we also include these policies in there as well? Is there any reason why we couldn't?
I think, Sharon, that has not, or Director Fox, that has not been your practice prior with our other two community groups.
Yeah.
And, with the other two, IRCO and with Latino Network, that they are aware of what our policies are. But again, I leave that to the board for discussion.
Well, the reason I'm asking, because this is a different kind of partnership, right? It's different from IRCO, and because this is advocacy activism. So yeah, I don't know. I leave it up for, I want other board opinions. I want other board members' opinions, I guess, and students.
Board members, comments?
I think because because it is a one-year contract, I think we do have the opportunity to review it if we see anything that we deem inappropriate. I don't see it's that different from the contracts we've already signed with IRCO and Latino Network.
Well, with all, so Director Zerchmead, when I reviewed their, went into their website and whatnot, it does look very different in terms of just their programs. And maybe we're not doing all those, and maybe that's where the disconnect is. So I guess I have a different perspective on that.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead, Maureen.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say, I think this might be a definitional question too, because like the term advocacy can mean a lot of different things. And I don't think like this wouldn't be about advocating for political positions or anything along those issues. I think my understanding of how I'm reading this would be the advocacy would be more about like self-advocacy and community advocacy in that context, and it shouldn't be about politics in terms of like partisan politics. And I think that should and probably is, I hope, the expectation of the district, that would not be a permitted action under this contract in any way. But I do think, advocacy in the sort of context of like advocating for oneself and one's family and one's community is a valuable skill set. But I think I understand the concern where you're coming from, and I guess I just read it in a different way, perhaps.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Director Bowman, because I think you nailed it in terms of just when we have such vague terms, which I'm learning that vagueness a lot of times leaves a lot of room for like misperceptions or misunderstandings. And so I'm trying to get better at like, what are we talking about? And so I appreciate that. But is there any way that we can make that clear in the contract so there isn't misunderstanding, both for our community members too, right? Because if I understand it that way, are others going to understand it that way? So I guess I just asked for clarity around that that's what we're talking about, because I totally agree that we want students to advocate for themselves and learn how to articulate issues and problem solve. So yeah, totally. But yeah, I worry about going beyond that, because then you have, again, REAP has a pretty good reputation, but this is a precedent we're setting. So I just want to make sure we have conversation and we understand what we're doing and set the parameters that we want right out the door.
So I guess, Director Fox, my wondering, and this maybe goes to Director Moore, Ebert, Dr. Ricky Smith. So we, as a governing body or an organization, have a series of policies, and we contract with an organization. I don't see how this working directly with students could be exempt from these particular policies, that if a student felt that they were excluded or in, just out of sync with a particular message, I felt that Zinnia kind of attempted to reiterate the collaborative style, right? And to Ben's point, I mean, I guess I'm going to go, to a point of order. Director Fox, you can make a motion to amend if you choose, and then if you don't get a second, it would die on the floor. I'm not hearing necessarily support to modify the contract. I may be wrong. I can take some nods one way or the other from fellow board members. But in terms of just moving this forward, I think to Director Bowman's point about what does advocacy mean, I think lifting students up and giving them an opportunity to find their voice is really important, that many of us might take for granted. I think that there are wraparounds to ensure that students, that we're training our adults, that we're working with our students effectively, and if there's flags, that those will be shared. So I am comfortable moving forward with a contract as is. So I'm getting more just into the, how are we going to move this forward?
Yeah, well, I'm not, well, I'm not very quick at thinking at words to put in a, to amend amend the contract, but I want to vote for this. So I would like to vote for it if we have some parameters around definition of what we mean by advocacy, or that they are accountable to to GBG and IGDA or something like that. Just so because I think it would make everybody in our community more comfortable too, that if my kid participates in this, I'm not sure, what the parameters are for their, and what curriculum they're learning, all this kind of stuff. And so I just want to make sure, I think it would put all our community members at ease if we were more clear. But unfortunately, I'm not quick thinking, as I'd have to look at the contract and come up with some language.
And I guess for me also, my apologies, is that when we put out the RFP, it was specifically to highlight those that are underrepresented and underserved, to feel seen and included. So I think I'm aligned at so understand the vagueness might be a sticking point. From what Director Bowman said, that's exactly the purpose of the contract, was to ensure self-advocacy, build self-determination, and all those other components of self-advocacy and community advocacy. The same thing that we're seeing from our affinity groups and the work that TTSU is doing, like all that type of support. So
well, I guess is there any downside of putting that in? Because I would say this should apply to all of our partner contracts. I probably would have recommended, even though we're not doing that kind of stuff necessarily with URCO and Latino Network, but I the more I get involved in these contracts, the more I realize it's hard to keep external organizations accountable. So anyway, I guess what's the downside of putting something to that language?
I'm wondering if
Go
ahead, Director.
Director Fox. One thing to consider is, and we didn't make this clear in our communication as far as the board memo is concerned, but the RFP itself becomes part of the contract, and we include as part of the scope and under the pillars that the services are to support the development of student leadership and develop advocacy skills. So I know that's probably not as clear as you want it, related to what type of advocacy skills are we trying to develop in our students. But I just want to remind everyone that the content of the RFP and their response becomes part of the contract. And in our language, in our contract language, we have a blanket statement in there that all federal, state, local laws and regulations and ordinances, we don't specifically say policy, but I think it's intended to cover our board policies too.
Yeah.
And our ARs.
And that goes back to my wondering is I don't see how, when a governing body has a set of policies, that especially in this particular area. Sharon, what I would recommend is Zinnia mentioned, Mark Jackson would be more than happy to sit down and walk through, because what I feel like from this contract, I would think that Mark and Reef would want to go forward in good faith, that they have heard the concerns and the opportunities offered each child who wants to participate. So I would be more than happy to join you in that conversation. And I think, to Director Moore's point, that where we are in this process, I would prefer to have that meeting with Mark Jackson to walk through your concerns and see how we ensure that this is moving forward to offer up an opportunity that interests all of our students that we're targeting with these programs.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, sorry, go ahead, Director.
Chair Wolf, if you end up deciding to do that, one way we could get through tonight is a lot of times the board action includes the authorization for the superintendent or designee to negotiate the terms of the contract. And if following those discussions, there's clarity around what REAP's intent is in their proposal, then we can, maybe there ends up being no negotiation, or perhaps if there is some clarifications that we don't know about tonight, then we can Mark and I can, or Dr. Sue can sit down and talk about it and finalize the contract that way.
Yeah, Ben, go ahead.
The one thing I would be okay with that. I think the one thing that in my mind, any sort of like partisan activity would fall outside the scope of this contract. And I think what, the district staff acting at our direction would be, I think, probably able to manage that contract appropriately and enforce the contract as it's written. So I'm okay with adopting as is, knowing that, and knowing, like, hearing and agreeing with the idea that we shouldn't be hiring an outside contractor to do sort of partisan activity. And the clarification we heard tonight, I'd love to be able to vote on it tonight and move forward with that, but want to, Director Fox, are you in a similar place, or do you feel like there's still more questions?
Well, I still have more questions, and I appreciate everybody's good faith effort, to address them. It's just like, this is a big new step I feel like this is a big new step for our district. And I just want to make sure that we, and I really appreciate the conversation tonight. I just want to make sure that we consider this carefully, and that we consider any unintended consequences. And so, to the extent we can build into a contract, be clear with them verbally or what have you. But I want to be able to say, if someone says, what is this contract? I want to be able to say it's this, and here's what they're going to do. I'm not going to be able to go through this RFP, right, with them. So I just want to be able to be very clear about what we're doing and what their role is in our district and outside the district. So, I'm kind of rambling.
I think I might have a solution, and
thank you, Jill.
Director Fox, tell me if this would work for you. If I were to propose a motion to approve the contract to provide the services with the understanding that they do not include any political advocacy services.
Yes, I would be totally okay with that.
With the rest of the board, does that seem like it's a reasonable clarification that we could put into the motion? I'm looking mostly at the Director Moore to make sure.
Yeah, but Director Zertsmead, the reason I guess I would rather lean towards Director Fox having an opportunity to directly have a conversation with Mark Jackson and amend the motion for further negotiation for Dr. Ricky Smith, because here's the thing, political is a pretty big umbrella these days.
I was going to say the same thing.
Okay. So I am not comfortable with that word, because soup to nuts is now political. I'm sorry.
No, that's why I threw it out there as a sort of proposal, motion rather than an actual.
Thank you, Director Zertsmead.
Well, I would argue that almost everything's political nowadays.
Right. So I'm going to
is what I'm saying. So
I'm going to move to authorize the superintendent to negotiate a contract, presumably a 2-year contract with REAP, for a fee not to exceed $275,000 to provide student voice and youth advocacy services.
A second.
Motion was made and seconded to adopt the motion as modified. How about that? And that is clearly to redirect in terms of Dr. Ricky Smith having authority to finalize the negotiation. And I'm going to slide into further discussion. And with that point, Director Fox, I do think that it's really important that we schedule a meeting with Mark Jackson, because your questions are fair, and I'm certainly supported by members in the community, and I think it's a tremendous opportunity to sit with Mark Jackson. And
I would like that. Can we have that in the next, before we sign the contract, can we have that conversation?
Yeah, because Sue would be negotiating it, so I think.
Yeah, so I'm looking at Sue. I'm looking at you in the corner of my screen, Sue.
Yes, certainly. I would expect that you would have that conversation while we're in the midst of that negotiation.
Okay.
Final sign.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
That's good. All right.
All right. So now I will go to the motion, and as we've done all night, roll call. If in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Director Bowman.
Aye, sorry.
All good. Director Emerson.
Aye.
Director Fox.
Aye. Sorry.
All good. Director Zertsmead.
Aye.
And Director Wolf, I am an aye. So motion carries unanimously. And that is the last agenda item. And Director Moore, Director Unn, thank you. Dr. Ricky Smith will connect to get that scheduled and have that conversation, and really appreciate, as always, Eddie, welcome. Appreciate the dialogue. Emily, Rowan, always really appreciate your thoughtfulness and engagement in our conversations. You all have a wonderful evening here at 9:10 p.m. So anyway, good night.